WTF movies, a series where I review movies that make me go, what the fuck? Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of WTF Movies. My name is Silas, I will be your host again, and this week I have scoured the bowels of the internet. I have bravely gone where no man has gone before. I'm talking about, obviously, your mama. Well, that doesn't really make sense, does it? Because you're here. But moving on, let's not get caught up in the details. This week, I have found a very interesting film. Interesting in the sense that it's kind of heartbreaking. So this film features Morgan Freeman, John Travolta, Robert Patrick, Famke Janssen, and Brendan Fraser. These are just the top of my head. So, what happened? Before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, like, subscribe, comment, all appreciated. However, if you don't want to have the film spoiled for you, if you would rather just hear my take on it, just my final verdict, what the audience thought, the general scores, I'm going to leave in the description below the exact time from where to where the spoilers are, so you can skip those and just see the final results. It's up to you, but obviously it's a lot more fun if you see the whole thing. Right. Let's get started. The film is based in 1978. Please remember that, because the film won't. And let's go to our main character to deliver us his opening monologue. My name is Carson Phillips. I'm a PI. I like to drink, I like to smoke, I like to gamble. Sometimes a little too much. But you know what they say. Everything in moderation, including moderation. It took me a little while to figure out why I was so bored by this film. And then it dawned on me. The main lion's share of the fault, unfortunately, lies with John Travolta's performance. This is a hard-boiled detective who's been through it all, he's seen everything, he's up to here, he's made mistakes, he doesn't care anymore, he's not fazed by anything, he's drinking all day. And yet, for some reason, he decided to sort of give him this sing-songy, chill vibe, like he's just not bothered by anything, even though he's supposed to be suffering through life, right? So that already gave it this okay vibe, Is the writing cliche? Yes. Could it have been performed even better? Yes. So I don't know what happened. Anyways, moving on. Our detective Carson realizes that he is being hounded by a bunch of dudes who have a problem with him. He makes a run for it. He does say that I think I could have taken them, but I just wanted to save my cat. Yeah, sure. I'm not gonna argue. He runs out the back door, through the alley, through the alley with his cat, bumps into a dude, and we get probably one of the most hilarious takedowns I've seen recently, where he just gives his cat to someone and just knees him in the balls. Boom. Next scene. Straight up, we get more monologuing and sexy smoldering. Do I remember or care what the monologue's about? Not really. Carson heads into his office, and straight away I have to point out that this film, for some reason, has a serious problem with lighting. The whole thing is overexposed. Like, there's a desk lamp that's so bright it's almost reflected in the camera. How? This is a serious production. What happened? Anyway, he bumps into his receptionist, and she directs him into the office where there's a new client, Mrs. Cleavage. She's not called Mrs. Cleavage, but she is Mrs. Cleavage. I mean, we got this shot, and this shot, and this shot, and this shot. Boobs. Am I right? So this lady's got a new case for our hero. It's got to do with a certain lady called Barbara Van Poel, who has been in a mental asylum down in Texas. However, recently the asylum has been ducking her calls, giving her the runaround, so she would like Carson to investigate. Receptionist lady chips in that, yeah, you should take the job because you got all these problems, which, first of all, rude. Why are you listening to someone else's conversation? Moving on, our hero accepts the case because he cannot resist the combined power of cash and close-up of boobs. Next scene. We drive down to Texas as the credits fly by, and we get some more moody exposition, title card, and Texas, here we go, baby. At Pleasant Meadows, our hero is greeted by a lady. But twist, we immediately find out that no, she is not a doctor, she's actually one of the patients. More on that later. At reception, Carson runs into a nurse, and immediately there is some trouble because, and I quote, "I don't recognize the name Barbara Wampool." There's a little bit of sass, and then, with some horrible lighting and a very, very slow introduction, we finally meet the kooky doctor himself, Dr. Mitchell, played by the one and only Brendan Fraser, star of such films as The Tommy and the very famous Journey to the Center of the Earth, subtitle because he needs the exercise. Okay, I'm sorry. Moving on. Our good doctor comes up with some ridiculous excuses. Barbara Wampool, well, she is there, but she's in a therapy session. She's gonna be in there all afternoon. She's gonna be really tired when she finishes. Why don't I just call you tomorrow? Yada yada yada. And sends our detective on his way. Also, there is a very suspicious door, which we should remember for later. Carson heads back to the hotel and informs us via voiceover that he's going to investigate immediately the local casino. Because that's right, in this film, transitions have transitions. At the casino, we meet our merry band of secondary characters, the townsfolk. We have Slide, who is the local hippie slash drug enthusiast. We have Chief Walsh. We have Lorenzo, who we know is a villain because he says things such as, "Can we play some goddamn cards, cabron?" Also, Lorenzo is linked to Dr. Mitchell from the mental asylum. Fun fact. Rose, Doc's daughter and the local singer slash, to quote one of the characters, "that slut," her words not mine. And Doc, local casino owner, power player, well, the de facto mayor of the town. Finally, we have Happy, up-and-coming football player, football legend in his own right, and contrary to his name, bit of an asshole. Check out this shot with Carson and Doc shaking hands. They're basically shining. And then some more poker playing ensues. And this is intercut with some scenes of a girl outside in the car drinking and looking at a gun and crying very melodramatically. It slightly reminds me of The Room. "You're tearing me apart, Lisa." It's a bit like that. Doc finally wins. And in case you were wondering what kind of character he is, Morgan Freeman informs us, "I never lose Carson." We find out about Carson's ex. Turns out that he just bailed on her, went to LA, like no word, nothing, and fight breaks out. Doc calms spirits down by casually shooting his gun into the ceiling, because Texas. Happy gets thrown out of the casino and he gets a proper telling off as well. But while he's outside, he's being watched by the girl. Is she gonna shoot him? What's gonna happen? Oh, the drama! Nobody dies, except my faith that this film will get better. Carson goes back to the hotel. He is ambushed by the same guy from LA previously, the guy that he handed the cat to and just kneed into the balls. But again, Carson knows Kung Fu, so beats him in like a couple seconds and has a chat with his boss who's been waiting inside in Carson's room. The whole conversation's about this guy's daughter that Carson had some sort of deal with. Frankly, it's not really important. The only thing you have to know for character development that the boss tells Carson is that he is a sucker for a beautiful woman with a sob story. And as it's been already proven by the storyline, for any woman with boobs. The very next day, Carson goes back to the asylum. Surprised, the doctor did not call him. So Carson's obviously suspicious at this point. He kind of figures out that the doctor is being used to some purpose. And he also has some questions about the whole asylum, the way it's run itself. So he sneaks in through that very interesting door that we've mentioned before. We get some very classic NPC dialogue. It just feels like a video game from like the late 2000s. Where you just hear the bad guys kind of saying, "Yeah, did you get that thing done, bro? Okay, go kill him." Wah. He gets into Dr. Mitchell's office, where he finds Barbara Wampool's files. Turns out it's empty. Whoa. And also, the good doctor has been laying down some heavy bets against the town's local football team. Unfortunately, Dr. Mitchell returns, so Carson has to sneak out the window and then even bigger whoopsie, Dr. Mitchell closes the window that Carson just snuck out through. Also, we get a lovely bit of character development. Dr. Mitchell farts. The director thought that was important. Carson, realizing that he cannot get back into the office, does the only thing that any sane person would do, jumps down from the first floor, aiming for a tree. He falls on the floor, wakes up under the watchful eye of the previous woman that we've met, who is a paranoid schizophrenic, because that's gonna be good for her mental health, and limps away. Coming up, we have game night. The world's sexiest private detective alive, as voted by your auntie, heads into the hotel to hand in some pictures that he's taken from Dr. Mitchell's office. He also, the receptionist offers to clean his jacket, give it into dry cleaning, and apparently some of the LA boys have been keeping an eye on our hero. Just at that moment, we hear on the radio that Happy Chandler has had a collision on the football field and is being stretchered off. Something is wrong. He races to the football stadium, arrives just in time as Happy is being stretchered off, but he is foaming at the mouth. That's not normal. And then, the two former lovers, Carson and his ex, come face to face. We have a very dramatic close-up of both of their reactions, and a little bit of backstory. The reason Carson's ex is there is because her daughter is married to Happy Chandler, part-time football hero, full-time asshole. Carson spends the night in the hotel, and now, because this is a moody detective drama, none of that Mickey Mouse bullshit, there are 2 empty bottles of bourbon next to him in the bed in the morning. Also, his ex calls him over for a chat. He goes over to her house, and they have a very emotional and taxing and deep conversation, which we know is an emotional and taxing and deep conversation, because throughout the whole thing, or most of it, there is smooth, dark jazz playing in the background. So emotional, so moving. And then a little bit of backstory. So what happened was, back in the day when Carson himself was a football legend in town, he threw a game under the influence of some of the local power players, and then out of shame or just because he's had enough, he just bailed on the whole town, including his girlfriend, and went to LA. In the meantime, she got married to a local oil magnate and had a daughter. Time for the sexy dialogue. Looks can be deceiving. This is a bad place, Carson. Far worse than you can imagine. Right, if you're a budding director, or editor, or writer, or just someone involved in the making of a film, ask yourself this question. If 2 of your characters having a general chat requires smooth, sexy blues, jazz music just to make it that much more emotionally potent, what would Jesus do? Oh, and I almost forgot. She hires Carson to investigate the death of Happy because she is worried that her daughter might be somehow implicated by the police. Later on, we find out from our hero/narrator that his previous employer's phone number, Mrs. Cleavage, has been disconnected. So that case can go on hold for a while until the plot requires it to return. How convenient. He is following the local coroner and also threatening a poor mine because he is not a traditional hero. Get it? Get it, you guys? Anyway, turns out that Happy didn't die from his football tackle because there was also some mysterious substance in his system. Fun fact, the tackle was so vicious that Happy broke his collarbone and his femur. Because he was doing heads, shoulders, knees, and toes? I guess? I don't know. Carson's ex, Jane, who I will be calling her Jane from now on, goes to Doc to make a deal. Basically, she would like him to use his influence to get the police off her daughter's back. Doc, on the other hand, would like to become a majority partner in her dead husband's remaining oil business. Now, I'm not about to commit blasphemy and talk bad about Morgan Freeman's performance. It is one of the best things in the whole film. However, because his character is written one-dimensionally, all he does is be this very calm and cool and collected and menacing bad guy. So he's talking with just a very reduced speed and enjoying everything he says. And then he bites into a vegetable with evil in his eyes. Oh, and I almost forgot, Doc would also like Jane to rein in or slightly seduce Carson away from his investigation because that would interfere with some of Doc's businesses. Because he's evil, you know? He's a bad guy. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Carson interrogates Slide in a bar. We find out that Dr. Mitchell actually owes some money to Doc, so there's a whole thing going on there. And Lorenzo, who used to work for Dr. Mitchell in the hospital, is actually running dope. We do actually find out later on what drugs Lorenzo's dealing in, but right now, the way it's treated and the way characters are talking about it, Lorenzo is dealing in all the drugs. Lorenzo shows up with some suspicious bags. Our hero and Chief/Sheriff Walsh face off in a diner. Basically, they exchange theories. The sheriff is convinced that Jane's daughter killed Happy because, basically, actual quote, he was sleeping around with that slut Rose and a bunch of other girls. While Carson is leaning towards the theory that it might have been one of the power players involved in the betting on the game. Next, Carson interviews Rose at the casino. Basically, were you or were you not a gold-digging hua? She deflects a lot of this questioning. She leaves a lipstick mark, well, basically just a perfect imprint of her red lips on a napkin, because she's a bad girl. And then just as you could cut the sexual tension with a chainsaw, Doc shows up and leads Carson away to a very intense ride. And I was gonna do some sort of sexual joke there, but let's just move on. But somebody takes the napkin. We get to the remote cottage and we get a bit more of Morgan Freeman being menacing and cool and calm and just very evil. And we get one of my favorite conversations in the whole film. Basically, Doc knows that Barbara Van Poel is dead. Now, if Carson is willing to take that piece of information and solve his initial case, then in exchange he has to leave town. Actual quote, Barbara Van Poel is as dead as Julius Caesar. I mean, yeah, Julius Caesar is a person who is dead. So is Alexander the Great, Catherine the Great, Hannibal Barca, Adolf Hitler, William Wallace, William the Conqueror, Jesus, although that one's being debated. Technically, a whole history's worth of people that are dead. But yeah, big up the random historical reference. Also, why do I suddenly feel so insignificant and small and just having a general existential crisis? This was supposed to be a light-hearted film review? I'm gonna need it now. Phew! I'm back. So, Doc offers to forge a death certificate and a will to Barbara's relative, but Carson has to leave town. However, he refuses because he cannot do the same thing again to Jane. That's nice. Well done, Carson. Doc has one of his henchmen drop Carson off in a secluded neighborhood of the town when suddenly, shootout on the stairs. These are the LA boys back again. This is actually a weird shootout because on the one hand, you get some kind of cool shots with the dark silhouettes in the streetlight. On the other hand, you can't see anything, just movement and some sort of commotion and then pew 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 pew, and there you go. Carson kills about everyone. One guy runs away and Carson, because he's cool and all that, walks off. No weight to it. Nobody lost anything, nobody won anything, except me. I lost an hour and a half of my life. The sheriff goes to report to Doc about the shooting, because obviously they're in cahoots, and Doc finds it interesting and he gives the order to the sheriff to keep the pressure on Jane and her daughter, because he wants every single last drop of that oil. Doc, you're a bad man. Following up straight after, we have a passive-aggressive chat between the sheriff and Carson, and we find out some more details about the town. Turns out Jane's dead husband, the oil magnate, has actually covered up some evidence that his business was poisoning the local area, and that's why Jane is not very well liked. Also, very important, Happy used to beat Becky, his wife. Oh, the plot thickens and it thickens even more. Carson straight away drives off to confront Becky and Jane about their secrets. Initially, they're sticking to their story. However, Jane relents and they go off to the secluded area where Jane, and y'all get your butts ready, we're about to have some revelations. Yes, Jane's husband was actually poisoning the land and the people. However, are you ready for this? Becky is not just Jane's daughter. She is Jane's and Carson's daughter. We get the most John Travolta reaction in the whole film when he says, "Why wouldn't you tell me something like that? Don't I have something to do with that decision? Come on." Hi, I'm Silas, the director. Darling, you're not talking about Tic Tacs. A little bit more energy, please. Thank you. And they kiss. Lovers reunited at last. Now things are serious. The dots are starting finally to get connected. The coroner calls, and turns out that there was also a very high amount of cancer medication in Happy's system, which you can only get from a prescription. The doctor. Becky, Carson's daughter, shows up, who's actually played by John Travolta's real-life daughter, and they immediately have some father-daughter bonding. Sure, your mom just told you that your dad wasn't your dad and you know, well, hey, moving on. Anyway, Carson decides to teach her how to eat donuts like they do in LA, but haha, they don't eat donuts in LA, only Sprouts and Botox. Slide makes the dramatic entrance. At this stage, Carson decides to slap the truth out of Slide, and the interrogation begins. At the same time, Sheriff Walsh turns up at Jane's. He wants to arrest Becky. Meanwhile, back at the hotel, Slide is filling us in on the information. Happy owed money to Doc. Not Doc the doctor, but Doc Morgan Freeman, the bad guy. And in order to repay his debt, he was going to throw the game. However, he got greedy. He got in business with Dr. Mitchell, the actual doctor of the mental asylum. However, Dr. Mitchell got Happy killed. Piece of cake, easy to follow. At this stage, Jane gets the sheriff on the phone with Carson. They make a deal, give me 24 hours and I'm gonna prove that Becky's innocent. And suddenly, Carson is in full-on Papa Bear mode because he says, "Watch your mouth, that's my daughter you're talking about." So I guess we're rolling with it. Carson and Doc have a sit-down, and basically Carson is just going to rule him out as a suspect. Turns out Doc and Dr. Mitchell have a rivalry. Dr. Mitchell was cutting into his business, his drug dealing business, because in this film, in the middle of the film, Breaking Bad happens, and he would be quite happy if Dr. Mitchell was out of the way. And now, my favorite sequence of the whole film happens. Carson finds the note with the lipstick mark on it, telling him to meet up this random person in the middle of the football field at night. He does. Turns up, while he's down in the middle of the football field, hanging about, Lorenzo, up in the stands, takes aim at Carson with a sniper rifle. So they exchange fire. Carson's got a little pistol, he's got his rifle, they're running and aiming and ducking. Anyway, Carson makes his way step by step to the center of the field, hides behind this dummy, at which point Lorenzo lowers his rifle, starts looking around like he's not right there in front of him, and gets knocked out by a football thrown right from front of him. How is that a surprise? Back at the hotel, Carson picks up his jacket from the receptionist, and he accidentally triggers Carson's mind palace by the single phrase, "Were you rolling around in the grave?" So suddenly he connects his jacket to the mental asylum that with all these disappearing patients, they must be buried on the grounds. So next, he's digging up one of the bodies. How does he know where to dig? I don't know. He's either really lucky or he spent the last 2.5 hours at night digging in a mental asylum's courtyard. Nobody realized. At this exact moment, naturally, Dr. Miles Mitchell shows up doing his shtick. Brendan Fraser has decided to play this kooky character in a bit Charlie Chaplin kind of way. You need to check it out, like, it is glorious. So, the big reveal. Lorenzo is a drug runner. Miles is a meth cook. Shootout, we get actual NPC dialogue. "I got you, cabron." The meth lab sets on fire, the whole thing burns down. Just as Miles is about to hand himself in, he throws his gun on the floor, he gets shot in the back with a shotgun by the paranoid schizophrenic lady. Now you might be thinking, silence is not a nice thing to define a person by their medical condition. You're absolutely right. Does the film give this character a name? No. Also, and I repeat, Miles threw his gun away. So him getting shot is a good thing because he was probably bad towards the patients, like it was never really suggested. Power to the people. So there you have it, case closed. However, at this stage I realized that there's 50 more minutes of this film. So is it? The sheriff shows up only to get debriefed by Carson, at which stage he just moves on. Carson moves on to speak to Doc, debriefs him as well. They kind of settle their differences, and Morgan Freeman gets to be mischievous one last time by saying the following words. There's no end to the lengths a mother will go to protect her daughter. Oh no, does that mean what I think it means? Carson goes home, just about as he rolls in, we see Jane coughing. Cancer, medicine, oh my god! They kiss, they dance, everything's fine. The next morning, Carson goes into the bathroom, sees the pills. We get one last confrontation between the family members. It is a three-way, mom, daughter, and dad. I just let the words speak for themselves. Did you kill my husband, mama? I said more energy. Did I not say more energy? They cry and make up. Next scene, they're visiting Barbara Van Poel's grave, who's finally received the proper burial, and they drive away back home. The film ends with Carson delivering a monologue about something in front of his house, well, in front of Jane's house, and then he just goes back in because he finally found home. Phew! That's over. Let's see what the public thinks. On IMDb, the public gave The Poison Rose 4.7. Yeah, I can dig it. Star power, but not much else. On Rotten Tomatoes, it has 22%. Harsh. Very harsh. But if you got bored or pissed off by the film, I can understand. And then Metacritic gave it a 5. Okay. If that's the kind of thing you're into, that's the kind of thing you're into. I'm not gonna judge. And that brings us to the final verdict. Man, I was actually bored. So there was a significant amount of this film where I was just like, there's stuff going on, but I don't care because you don't care. And that's how this works. Okay? Lighting, what's that all about? At times the characters are shining. Or the car bleeds in with the road because they're both kind of white and gray. Why? Like, these are not things, these are not mistakes that you could blame on a reduced budget. This is just filmmaking. The dialogue was cliche. It could have been delivered better in the cases of actors who did, i.e. Morgan Freeman. It worked. Were the characters one note? Yes, but it worked. You got away with it, kind of. Right, I was gonna give it 3.6, but then I realized that would put it right next to Samurai Cop with 3.5, and I want to leave a little bit of space between these two films, so it's getting 3.75. Yeah, it's bad. It's really bad. Alrighty, beautiful people, that wraps up this week's episode. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like and subscribe, share. I appreciate all the good stuff. Leave comments if you want me to suffer excruciating pain through some other film. Excruciating diction. Recommend them in the comments, and yeah, have a good one. See you next week.